All right, everybody, welcome to the Build Show, Boulder Lives Build Show. This is episode 3 as we continue with our construction of the bridge that we're constructing. Big, just
Your mic's right out again.
big schedule, and this is why. Um, circle back to that and get into the weeds on that. It just, what are you doing? Right? Are you,
I think your you need your change your microphone or something.
right. I'll do that. Well, catch us up on your your bridge project, and then we'll play
Okay.
your video.
All right. Well, I've been pouring a whole bunch of plaster in my uh, stone molds and chopping it all up and setting up so I can build a bridge abutment for this bridge to sit on and join with the 6 foot or 6 foot. It was 8 feet, but cut off a foot, so it's 7 foot bridge now, uh, along with the 1 foot Howe truss bridge. So that's where I'm at. I've put the plaster on the wood backing, the post that the abutment's on, and painted it up, and all of the stonework leading into it. I've done that as well. So there's a video of that a little bit later on. But I think the video Andy's going to play, I'm not sure which one it is now, but I will let you know what's happening or what
Well,
I'm
we're
doing.
going to continue with the video that we played on the last episode of Rouse, where he's working
Okay.
on the Howe Truss Bridge.
Yeah.
This is a continuation of that video with it sped up. There's about 10 minutes where he can kind of catch you up on what he was doing with that construction. So, all
And
right, let's go ahead and play that.
if I can give you a tip before we start,
Sure.
don't buy a Hunter Line bridge off the internet or eBay unless you're buying it directly from Hunter Line or a well-known store. I did that. I got it from eBay, and it was missing the instructions. It was missing some other pieces that I had to contact Hunter Line for, and I managed to get it finished, of course. And you'll see in the construction how it went together in the video.
All right, if that works. All right. Oh, there we go. All right, that should be good. You should be playing. You should be live, Ralph.
I don't see anything. Oh, there we go.
All
Okay,
right.
that's the base or the bottom part, what they call the bottom chord. Um, I'm building. I have the plans underneath a piece of glass, so I guide it that way. Now I'm putting in the angle pieces that will receive the angles on the vertical part of the bridge, and they're all cut for you in this kit. So it's just a matter of gluing them in place. The way I do it, I have a little sort of like a glue pot, or I put a dab right on the glass, use an old micro brush without the brush on it, so it's just a plastic tip to apply the glue where I want it. And it went on really well, went together really well. The the way that it's supposed to be done, like there's the plan, which I had, but I didn't have the written instructions. And the written instructions tell you to do the sides first, not the top and bottom, as I did. Um, but I managed to get it done, and it worked out really well. So I'm just putting on these angle blocks because the pieces you're going to add to it have 90-degree cut wood, and you have to cut the wood yourself. It comes in like I think it's 18-inch lengths, or maybe it's a little bit shorter, but you have to cut the wood to size. And again, it looks like a complicated kit. It's not really. For me anyway, it went together fairly simple and quickly. Now I spread it out over 2 or 3 nights only because of my back problem. I couldn't sit in the chair long enough to do it in one big sitting. So I broke the video up and patched it together when I sent the video to Andy. So the angle blocks actually sit opposing each other, so that you can see I'm putting a block on either side. And the angle blocks are already cut for you, so you don't have to worry about that. I see we have Ken Amos Jr., Dave BNSF, Robert, Marty's Train Shed. Who else is here? Lynn McCurdy, Ethan Armitage. Now, all of the wood that I put on here, I also stained it with hunter line stains. So, I mean, you don't have to use hunter line. I did because I just like the look of it. And the one I used here, oh geez, what's it called? That's not it. Well, it's the old, the same colors, a similar color to the old Floquil color. And it just looks so good when it's on all put together, like weathered wood. You don't have to do anything to the wood to distress it. The bridge basically is fully intact when you're done. Okay, so now there's cross members that go in. These cross members are going to hold the track structure. There's straight through beams that are going to go on top of this, and then your ties on those beams. So this has to be spaced almost exactly. As you can see, the bottom of the picture where those little blocks are, you see the little gray squares? That's the blocks I'm putting on now. And they stand vertical. So I'm putting, instead of, there are two side by side, 2 of them, but I didn't put the second ones in until I got the sides going and the vertical pieces in, so that there was no conflict. The angle wasn't cut off by the top of a piece. And the glue I'm using, you can use any kind of PVA white glue. I wouldn't use carpenter's glue, but I use canopy glue myself, which is a form of PVA. And for all of my fine scale structures that I build, the wood structures and so on, I use the canopy glue. I find it the best for the purpose. It dries fairly quickly, or pardon me, sets, not dries. It takes at least 24 hours to dry properly. The nice part about it is it sort of remains slightly flexible. So if you make a mistake, it's easy to get a number 11 underneath it to cut it out and do it over again. So there's the track structure, which I did in the previous video. And then what am I doing here? Oh, okay, maybe it's oh, right. These things need spacers, and the spacers are probably about 3/64ths, and they're cut to about a 16th of an inch wide. And you build up these pieces with the spacers between them. Where did they go now? They were up on top, I believe. So I have a square just taped to the glass so that I can square up the edges. I don't have to worry about square. All I have to do is flip it over and flatten it on the glass, and it straightens out. And there's about 4 or 5 pieces that go together for each section.
I think this is about where I broke it real. You got a second or two? Yeah, that's it.
So this was the fun part.
Yeah, and you still have another segment for a future show, and I broke it just after it showcases the whole bridge, so people get that little insight into what's coming next as you build that platform. But that broke it down into roughly a 10-minute segment video. So I think the rest of that video will conclude on the next show. I think there's about 10 more minutes, with sped up on that next show. So. And what was that color? Is that color like a driftwood color that you're working with?
That's exactly what it is. Driftwood.
I love that Flocal stain many years ago, but I really do like Hunter Valley stuff.
And since the Floquil went away, everybody was complaining they couldn't get it. And all of a sudden, I see it come out in the Hunter line. So I grabbed it just to see if it was the same, and it was spot on.
It's great. I've been meaning to try the Vateros by Best Trades, just as a matter of new course make sure, because a lot of modelers on YouTube are working with those. But I have no complaints with Hunter Line. That stuff's great. And actually, some of the quote unquote pigments, I have their white pigment. It's not a stain, obviously, but a pigment. It's really good for like a dry brushing effect that I do on ties to kind of pull the white edge and especially on ballast and stuff. So
the nice part about that white that they have, you can thin it out even more and make a white wash with it.
Oh yeah.
So like let's say you're doing a water tower and you want those calcium stains when you're done. So you get those white lines coming from between the boards near the bottom of the water tower. That's what I did with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that pigment, and I have some of the others like the red and a couple other colors that I want to experiment with. I even have the green that I want to experiment with along with some water. Especially after watching Boomer's work on water, I'm changing my philosophy considerably, including on this module. At the bottom of the bridge, there's a stream. It's barely even a creek, but there's a small stream there. But I'm going to do it as a flat bottom assembly as opposed to scenicking the bottom and pouring it with resin. I'm going to flat bottom, paint, and artist gel mediums. So, all right. So I have due to the delay. Yeah, Ralph.
Dave BNS has said, Ralph, you work quickly. Andy has it playing probably at about 1.5 times the speed, maybe 2 times.
I think it's about 4, but yes, it's quick.
Okay. Call me a liar. It's okay.
No, no. Yes, you do work very quickly, but even without the video being sped up, you're a particularly, and that's one of the examples of somebody who's been at it a long time and is fairly skilled. They say that about musicians, for example. A musician that looks like he's working really hard is a guy who has barely mastered it. True mastery is in the appearance of simplicity. So you see a guitarist or a bass player who's extremely skilled, they're playing something fairly complicated with just barely twitching a finger. It's so I spent a bunch of time. I had to take a little bit of a diversion from it. After last show, um, we had a discussion, as we often do, um, about how to answer some of these problems, how to build certain things, how to solve these. I think it's a great. Our community is really spectacular in the number of different opinions you'll get, and the rethinking and stuff. I am a better modeler. My layout will be significantly better because of my involvement with this community, and with Ralph and Robert and Bill and others that help me tremendously on things. But that doesn't always feel like the greatest compliment to give, considering that sometimes it causes me to reverse direction a bit. So my plan had been to use this show to build a bridge. Just it seems fairly obvious, but that had been my intention with this show, and for you guys was to take you guys along the journey of building the bridge with me and to do this show. I was building a bridge. And on the next Empires series, when that comes out, like this year, next year, whenever we do the next Empire series, I was going to build a module that a bridge sat in. Instead, you could see that I've went to great lengths to build a module, because some of our discussion with Ralph encouraged me to think that I need a module in order to figure out the right bridge insertion. So I need to be able to lay a piece of material. So I've got a piece of aluminum stock, 1 inch by 2 inch aluminum stock, and I'm going
Yeah.
to.
Wait, hang on a second. You were going to try and build the bridge out of pieces to build it like it really is,
Yes,
and we convinced you into using this U channel, aluminum U channel.
you did.
Now yours is slightly smaller than the one that I used, but still, it's still going to work.
Yeah, you've reversed or maybe rethink my opinion on several things. Speaking of that, let me just share a couple things with you guys as well. Uh, let's just do this.
Robert says, "Hey, some people can't just build a bridge."
Yeah, I can't apparently. So this is the bridge in question, the bridge I'm building. Um, 6 towers. It is 700 and touch feet long. In my model, it is almost 7 feet long. It was originally going to be 5.5 feet long, but if I was going to all the trouble of doing this, I might as well go back up to prototyping length. Um, but after that discussion, and the reason that we're delayed on this show coming out is because I basically had to take a month and work probably 40 or 50 hours building this. And it shouldn't take that long necessarily to build a module, but I'm working with this, newfangled concept of building a module, and building about with the C-frame design that includes the sky or the soffit, the valance, the lighting, all the wiring and cabling. It's all built into the sections. And this being quite tall, 43 inches tall, so to allow the bridge to be 20 inches, 21 inches tall, 7 foot long, fairly narrow, has to hang from the ceiling. And there's an aisle that walks under each side of the thing. So it had a lot of design constraints. The prototype would have a lot of design constraints regardless. And this particular module, due to how it integrates into the room and into the layout, definitely has a lot of constraints. So moving on, I will have some stuff on the next series about some of the stuff I've done here. But let's talk about. I was going to move and do this. What I'm getting ready to show you. I was going to go ahead. I was going to do that as one of the last shows. Probably track work be the last, but then I was going to work with bridge abutments. Um, Well, one thing is I've got to now, because of the design, I've got to build these platforms at the bottom because they have to be built into the framework I designed. You'll see those as I plant the bridge. Actually, it'll be more important to see that then. And then these abutments. And I'm just going to show you a few pictures here because none of them show the abutments specifically well. Um, I think this does the best job of showing the bridge abutments. You can see a bit from the far end. It's, of course, wider than the bridge girders. It is has a platform to set on, and it has these two components that set out. The front face of it comes all the way up to the height of the girders, or slightly above, to the top of the girders, and it has an inset back into the bridge where the girders set back in to the abutment and um, set on the bridge shoes, or on the bearing surfaces rather. So that's cosmetic. I mean, it's structural for what I'm doing, but it's also cosmetic. So now let's take a look at what I've done to build that thing. So, so one thing is I need a cosmetic abutment. It needs to look a certain way and emulate the prototype. That's one thing. But it needs to be structural as well. Those two things are not necessarily in contradiction to each other. Let me clamp this so it'll stay. Okay. Because my bridge is slightly curved as well, it doesn't just want to sit there. It's very slightly curved. It's only offset by a couple inches, but just that couple inches causes it to want to roll. So I have to account for that structurally. And because I want repeatability, I have 4 of these bridges to build. I've designed or built a formulation for how to build by abutments. Also, the girder, aluminum channel, has to inset down into it because the aluminum channel runs past the bridge, allowing me to lock that in place. It carries on into the roadbed later. It goes past the abutments. It'll go past the abutments, including the termination of the guardrails and the ties that are bridge spaced. So the longer ties that are spaced much more tightly will continue on. On the prototype, they continue 21 feet past the abutment. On my model, they'll continue a couple inches or something. I also wanted, it needed to be, and per Ralph's, recommendations and discussion, and me and Robert talking about this, I wanted it to be to hold the bridge and be robust, but also adjustable. So what I've come up with is it has a piece of 1x, and the U channel, the U channel that's between the girders of the bridge, sets over top and locks down in on top of that. Right now, this is the part that I'm reasonably proud of. But this part is the part this is the end of the abutment goes here. The U channel locks down in on top of that, and it's held by a girder clamp. And I'll use a shorter screw, but I put this long bolt in so you guys can see it. It doesn't disappear. That bolt will lock down against that U channel, which will keep this from coming apart. It'll also keep it from twisting. I also have this cut in a way to where it is. See, it won't even come apart when you want it to. It's continued on past. It's all solid inside of there. This is clamping the U channel to that block. So it has this piece. It also has this piece is inset into the framework, and it's bolted from the top and bottom, so it's quite strong. And it's using a piece of all thread. Now, it's not the riser per se, the all thread. Whereas I use all thread in these girders for risers in other places to hold up my spline roadbed. Here it's to give me adjustability. So below, I'll cut this to length. Below, in the bottom corner of this module, where this thing sits right here, it also, and I got a scrap to show you, but it sits. This piece here is glued, nailed into position. It's solid. This is just behind where the end of the bridge is cosmetically, but it's structural. It's a solid component. This sits just to this side of it, basically sitting on top of that piece of structural plywood. Now, the height of the track is not exactly at this. On one side, it's quite a bit above. It may be maybe an inch or two above that plate on that side. So it sets up above it. And the other side, it's a little less because it's climbing a grade. So, now what did I do with that bridge abutment? Oh, okay. Now, so the bridge abutment glues to the end of the wood and to the spots, to the aluminum U channel. So as the bridge moves up and down to the adjustment, all of the system goes with it. And since I use like fiberglass mesh tape and foam, I will have the fiberglass mesh tape meeting the road bed on this side. It will meet, and my road bed looks like this. The road bed looks like this with Homosot road bed, but it'll have a chunk, this sets into this basically. And so there'll be the pieces of Homosot that represent the size of the road bed will be glued to the side of this. This whole assembly can flex up and down to get the right height and to ensure that it's level and true. But I can adjust that height to get it right, which is real important because I have adjoining modules on either side and a grade to climb. So I have to get that elevation right. But this is adjustable. Now that's the structural part. The next part about this is the actual girder or the actual abutment that I made cosmetically. So that abutment has the inset.
More to your left.
Okay. Let me find just a second. Let me find the girders. I got them laying here. Or some of the girders. Okay. So the girders, which set on the side of the chair of the aluminum U channel, and let's just slide that out so you guys can get the feel for it. So it sets it. The girders set like this, and they set back into it. Actually, it might be better to do this. Okay. So now they meet just like the prototype does. It's so hard to hold this stuff. They meet just like the prototype does. They set back into the, they're sliding back into and setting on top of the bearing surface. So there's enough room for bearing surfaces or shoes inside of this, inside of this lip here. Yet the girders is set inside. And again, this whole assembly is infinitely adjustable. That had been my biggest concern, was trying to get this arrangement into something that I could adjust, because it's one thing to figure it out. That's a part of it, was figuring it out. The other part was, building something that I could adjust. Let me pop these wings off and I'll show you. Now the abutment, and I just showed you this abutment that has wings on it. However, the abutments for this bridge don't have wings, but I wanted the wings that sit on the other side. I wanted a design for the bridge abutments that I could use on not just the 4 of these big bridges I'm building, because I got 4 of these bad boys to build, but on some of these other future bridges, because I wanted something that would look consistent. If it was necessary to build a form and pour and cast plaster or dental plaster, which is what I've done for some of my other stuff, or just stick with pink extruded foam, fine. I just wanted something consistent. In this case, I'm using gator board, so it's quite strong. I mean, I am cutting into the surface of it, but it's particularly strong, and it can act as a bit of a structural element. It can sit on top of it. It doesn't necessarily have to in this bridge, but on other bridges, it does. It can act as a structural component. Now, in this bridge, I am cutting into it and recessing back into this thing a 1/4 inch or maybe a little more. I forget exactly how much, but something like a 1/4 inch. And that's exposing the actual foam. So I'm going to rebuild or reskin this thing, because this gator board is extruded foam on the inside, faced with wood. So I've got some microply. This is like 1/32 or 64ths or something. And I've got some pieces cut up already, but I didn't glue them in. And they'll be glued into this insert.
Are these abutments supposed to represent concrete?
Yes, yes. In this case, they're concrete. For stone abutments, I'll do something different. I'm not positive what I'll do. What I've done with stone abutments to date, and I have some stone abutments, and what I've done with them to date is used dental plaster um, for those, and they look pretty good. But I'm trying to develop techniques that work better with both my hatred for working with plaster um, and that work good as structural components and are particularly lightweight. Plaster, especially for abutments, is pretty lightweight though. But I don't know if I would have wanted plaster, say, for the bottom of these towers. Where these towers sit, and I'll go ahead and show you guys what a little bit about that. That's coming up on the next show. But let's go ahead and cover briefly about that. So here on this module, I have just like these pieces here that are structural that the abutment sits on. There are
So,
these
Andy,
steps here that you see.
Robert asked the question: who convinced you to build the module like that?
Some of that's your fault, Robert. For sure, I'm blaming some of it on you. It's definitely there's enough guilt to go around between you and Ralph and others in figuring out this arrangement. But
We
these
took him out.
seats,
Actually we took him out in the back alley, and we beat him up and told him he had to do it this way, or not do it at all.
yeah, that's right. I mean, convince me to do it right or not waste my time with it. Um, And this C-frame design that we've talked about before, that is the other modules I have, like these modules up here, are all C-frame modules. There's the aluminum. Oh, I got it turned this way. I'll show you. These are the other C-frame modules that I've got. 3 of them already built. This aluminum channel is hanging from the ceiling. It's hanging on all thread from the ceiling. There's nothing going to touch the floor. Nothing has touched the floor. The back of this module sets on this at about the halfway point. There's a cleat on the back of this module that sets on this, and then this module hangs down to here. So the top of the module goes all the way against the ceiling. It has a piece of aluminum, channel on the front edge, a corner strip that the fascia covers up, or the valance covers up. That way I can screw straight through to the ceiling on this, but it's not hanging from this. This does not make a structural element. It's setting on that strip on this aluminum channel that's hanging from the ceiling, and then this is just screwed to the ceiling to keep the module from doing this, to keep it from pivoting. It's just to keep it level and true. But I started on this C-frame design, and I had seen other people do it. I don't want to take all credit for this. Joe Fugate showed off a concept around his TOMA philosophy at a national, NMRA national, a few years ago. And I thought, well, sure, this is surely the way to do it, although I wasn't in love with anybody else's construction methods I had seen. So me and Robert, Ralph, had talked about this a lot, including Robert spending quite a few hours designing in SketchUp. And he actually has a SketchUp diagram. I have a copy of that shows how to build the modules in a straight configuration, in a configuration that gets wider or narrower, on curves, and different arrangements. But we had not figured this out with this crazy amount of depression in the module that I couldn't just keep it 46 inches or 4 foot tall all the way across, because there's an aisle that goes under here and an aisle that goes under on the other side. So it had to have some crazy stuff going on. And figured out exactly how to build that with C-frames. There's a C-frame in here, as you can barely see, that goes up, and there's a C-frame here and here, and they are different lengths. So I had to figure all that out. I also wanted, and this is partly due Ralph's fault as well, is that the towers will be structural. They're plastic. They don't have and if you've ever had one of these kits from microengineering, they feel pretty wobbly. As you start putting them together, they get strong, like anything else that's made out of a lot of parts, like a trestle. Actually, it's Norfolk Western calls these steel trestles or steel viaducts. They get quite strong, and they are reasonably robust. But the bridge being 7 foot long, even with the aluminum U channel, I wanted this to be structural so that gravity could work to my advantage. So this bridge tower setting here is setting on top of legs that stick up through the scenery and set on these steps. So you have track on aluminum U-channel with girders setting on top of the towers, towers setting on top of MDF legs, going down to the steps, and these steps are immediately adjacent to a C-frame. So the C-frame is carrying all the weight straight down through the bridge. So the scenery could be hollow or lightweight or fragile. It's irrelevant. The scenery does exactly what it's meant to do. It just covers up in its scenery. It's not, the scenery does not have to be structural then. So it carries straight on through. So those steps, same thing happens with the abutments with this plywood arrangement here. The abutments are mounted to everything and they slide up and down around this. So this is structural. This holds the bridge nice and true because it's going to mount to this, because this component, while this is adjustable here, it'll be bolted through. So this will carry the weight from this, but then I can adjust this arrangement. So it's both adjustable and quite strong. Tower's quite strong to go, but figuring out how to build this crazy bridge or this crazy module for the bridge is quite crazy. There's aisles going under both sides. It has to hang from the ceiling. They can have no legs on it. It also has this little lip that you can barely see here, where it has a photo backdrop, and the photo backdrop comes up in front of a set of LED strip lights here. So there's LED lights that shine over the top of the mountain. So, photo backdrop with the tree line, and there'll be light coming over the edge of that at dusk and dawn. So, I mean, that's an important scenic element, especially of lighting, if you've seen dusk and dawn in Appalachia. So
Andy, Baloo wants to know if you ever take a breath.
I mean, sure, but I could take a long time between breaths, I mean, if you just sit and breathe all the time, you're not getting anything done, It's just a waste of time. Eat, sleep, breathe. I try to do as little of those and do them as quickly as I possibly can.
Right.
Just wasting my time otherwise.
So basically the idea behind this module, the way it stands, is to have a complete bridge system without scenery.
Yes.
So that it supports itself within the structure of the module.
Absolutely. And 7 feet long, aisles on both sides, going under it, and it's hanging from the ceiling. And I mean, even the track elevation, I've got it set down here so you guys can see it so I can work with it. The track elevation on this bridge is at like 77, 78 inches. So it's way up, quite up in the air anyway. So
we had to talk him down. We had to talk him down off the edge of the cliff, because what he wanted to do was build the bridge, like the plate girder with the cross members and so on. And because it's 70 something inches above the floor, when you look up, he wanted to see those cross members.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't going to work in this case. And not saying that construction isn't strong. He wanted to put a curve in it. And
it has a little bit.
Robert and I went the same way. This aluminum channel was the way to go. Your plate girder is going to be a little bit longer than this. You paint the inside of this black. Bob's your uncle.
I think the plate girder arrangement, or I think the U-channel arrangement has way proven to me that it's the only way to build a bridge of any substance. I mean, if you have a 6 or 8 inch bridge somewhere, just use the microengineering plastic, build it the way microengineering kit says, and move on with your life. But if you're building a bridge of any length or substance, you need metal in it.
All you need to do is with the plate girder sections on the backside, I don't know whether you can see it, I trimmed off some of the ribs, and that smooth edge is going to go against the aluminum channel.
Yep.
So this is what Andy's doing. There you go. So what I did is I took a Dremel tool and I scored the edge of this and just used epoxy to hold it in place. And it lines up perfectly with the top of the bridge. And you lay your ties on top of there, and away you go. So that's what he's doing with this bridge.
The only thing different really about how my bridge interacts with my layout than Ralph's per se is uh, my layout being sectional means a little bit different than a more permanent layout would just give you a lot more ease of construction if your layout's permanent. But I never want to destroy a layout again. This layout's going to be movable. Even though I own my home, I plan on building a building or building a new home in the long term future. I never want to waste a layout ever again in my life. I'm never putting another layout in a dumpster. Um, and because of that, and because of the deep Appalachian scenery profile, I can't have a flat surface, so I built these steps into the construction, and they're solid. The module is incredibly solid, and it's 7 foot long, 4 foot tall, and I carried it uh, out of the off the trailer into the house, through the door, into the hallway, turning it up and sliding it in through the door. All of that by myself, one person. It's
Well,
light enough.
you should have heard him.
Well, yes, okay. So I did complain a little bit while doing it,
I,
but
I
one
didn't know he
person.
knew those words.
Well, I was prior military. I was educated on cussing like a pro. So, but one person, one 5'6" computer geek. Not some big bruiser, of a truck driver or something that's, that has to lift and carry heavy stuff all the time. I'm a keyboard warrior, in my day life. So, and I was able to carry this relatively large module in here by myself. I'll be able to put it up by myself. All of these modules. I mean, even these quarter modules that I worked with, the 4 foot quarter module, I put those all the way against the ceiling, all the way up against the ceiling by myself. Both of those two quarter modules. One person, one 5'6" computer geek, put these modules up in the air at 7 foot high, well, 8 foot high. They're lightweight enough. Now, much of this module is plywood because I needed. There's different benefits and pitfalls to every building material there are. There is some MDF in it. I really love working with MDF because of how MDF expands and contracts. Plywood expands and contracts in a singular direction. It expands across the grain. MDF expands and contracts equally in all directions, so which minimizes the expansion and contraction constraints. But when I needed the lateral strength, like I did for this module, a lot of this module is plywood because I care more about the lateral strength than I do about the risk of expansion and contraction issues. So
Yeah, but the plywood that you used for lateral strength does not have to be half inch, 3/4, whatever. It only like the back wall there is only what, 1/4 inch luan?
1/8 inch. Yeah, this is just 1/8 inch. Now,
Eighth
this is
inch.
not
Okay.
truly the
So that
backdrop. This is what I call a sub backdrop. It gets a backdrop on
that
top, but just styrene.
that ties everything together, that piece alone.
Yep. It was strong already before I put this piece on. I still need to make the cove. I already have the stuff to make this. I'm making the coved top quarters out of cardboard tube. So I've got a fixture that I've made up for cutting the cardboard tube on a table saw. You can't take a skill saw and just run down a cardboard tube. That's not. You've got to run it through a table saw to get a good straight cut. But I've got some 6-inch cardboard tube that I'm going to cut 4 cuts in it to make 4 quarters, and that will make up the top cove. And then when I turn quarters, I make a much broader curve. And the way I'm going to make that up is I'll have the much broader curve, and then I'll have short pieces, like 1 inch length pieces of the 3 inch curve, and then I'll just screen wire and plaster it, and I'll have a compound curve. So, and before I put this up, I haven't on the other ones yet, but I will on this one. Before I put it up, I'll go ahead and build this compound curve. Just needs to be roughly. Actually, I don't even know if I need to plaster it because the whole thing gets covered in styrene anyway. So for the sky, but got the structural components that hold the towers. They'll be setting on legs. They'll be setting on a 1 inch by 1 inch leg. But I'm going to build those legs out of gator board as well, and I'll just skin the top of it with the 1/32 ply. So it'll have a gator board 1 inch by 1 inch gator board will make up the legs that the tower is set on. The gator board is making these bridge abutments, um, and then I'll just skim coat them in plaster or spackle, especially because it has some seams in here. So I'll skim coat that
So
durable.
here's a
Plastic.
thought. Here's a thought you may want to consider. If you go to Home Depot, you can get spray that has like a sand in it, and you can get it in concrete color, and it's meant for spraying on terracotta flower pots. You can
Really?
spray your abutment bridge with that.
So what's
I,
the point of having sand in that paint? What are they doing with it?
it gives it texture.
Huh. Okay, we'll have to talk about that. I'll have to look that up. I mean, I have added like a lot of talcum powder to oil-based paint to get a concrete texture before, and it worked. I made some concrete bases for my water towers when I was modeling 1950, and it looked pretty good.
I used this stuff. It's
Okay.
made by a company called Deco Art. I also have the spray can, but this stuff is a paste. You thin it out, you paint it on, and it
Yeah.
has little black flecks in it. Um, although you can't see it too well. But once you put this on, and you come back with an airbrush and color it the color of concrete or the way you want it, and then do your weathering.
Okay. But you spray it. So are you saying you could run that through an
Well, this one
airbrush?
here, I put it on with a brush, but I have the spray can as well.
Oh, so you could buy it in a rattle can.
Yes.
I was concerned about trying to spray sand through an airbrush, for example. That seems
Well,
destined for problems.
I don't know how they do it. The granules that are in it are not really large granules, so it sprays pretty good as long as you shake it up really well.
Of course.
And even if you get it just to do your two bridge abutments and it plugs up, you're done. You've done it. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're finished. I think
No,
it
that'd
was
be
only
fine.
$6 or something for the can.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, I've already got to skim it. I'll skim it with something to get that finished up, and I'll show you guys those next time. But also, one last thing before we finish up this episode, and if anybody has any more questions, let's make sure we get to those or comment on the YouTube video, and we'll get to them on the next one. But one thing that I talked about the layout being modular, uh, not portable, movable, modular. I basically built everything modular. Let's see if I've got one laying here. I mean, my structures set on dioramas that they have little bases, and they have, they have like a, let's see, oh, they have like a framework. They have like a framework underneath the structures, um, so that each of my structures can set into a frame that enforces registration. And what I basically do is and actually I said that to the guys on the live show one night. I was cutting the slots out and framing for that, and asked me what in the world I was doing. I said I'm building basements, and they, what do you mean basements? I said, well, there was a basement in the real world. I got to have a basement. You'll never be able to see those basements. Yeah, but if it had a basement, it's got to have a basement. I was joking, obviously, but I basically put basements under all the buildings, basically, so I can enforce the registration with a little frame. But the basements gives me a spot to hide any of the electronics. Like even
Yeah.
this simple structure that only has two rooms in it, it has two lights in it. Each and it's divided with walls. It has doors and everything, so it casts shadows correctly. But it has multiple lights, and those lights are independently controlled, and they're computer controlled with a little Wi-Fi board, so they can turn on and off at different times. So I could have a house that comes on.
So there's
That like this house, and that's the same thing I bought it for. This house
yeah,
could kind of come on, and you could see the bedroom light come on, and a few seconds later the bathroom light, and then they both go off as the kitchen light comes on at 4 o'clock in the morning, as the conductor gets up and gets ready to go to work and run trains, and you see him progress through the house at 4 a.m. I'm not going to go to a lot of complexity to do that, but it's just with modern computer control stuff, that's a $2 board that will control those 10 lights that are in this one house. That's
yeah,
$2.
yeah.
So,
So
but everything
CV
modular.
CV Railroad says Rust-Oleum American accents. He has three of the cans in front of him. That's that sand paint.
All right.
And Sparky, yes, that's a laser cut rack that my paints are on, and it's made specifically for Tamiya paints.
And they have them for
three more
like
here.
different sizes.
I have 3 more here, one for Vallejo, one for AK, and one for ammo. So, and they're basically all the same. Just the hole that the bottle fits in is made specifically for those types of paints.
Yeah, they're a must-have. I keep meaning to order those, and we found Ralph got them like I think from AK, but we found the actual supplier for those, so you can order them yourself. And they make a bunch of, workbench style laser cut components. Little things that sit on the workbench, which I don't really care about those. I want all wall hung stuff. Oh yeah, but the point I was going to make before we closed up is everything on my layout is modular. The modules are modular, but this bridge will be takeable, outable. It's sectional and modular. This bridge abutment and support assembly is a modular component that could be taken out and rethought or reworked, or just the fact that it's separate allows it to be, it can be risen and lowered in order to adjust for it. And that also allows these abutments to be removable components, which also means I can put them in without them being perfectly finished and move on. And I can come back and drop these out and work on them, whether the stain them, replace them with plaster or styrene, if that makes more sense. But I really like Gatorboard for that. And the everything being so extremely modular gives me a lot of flexibility in the ability to tip things in and come back and improve them in the future non-destructively. So I can put a structure in and I can go back and add lighting or do other things, or put in a plastic structure and come back and put a really nice Craftsman laser kit later, and it's non-destructive to do so.
Right.
That was my point about modularity. But all right, guys. Well, we've run about an hour, almost an hour tonight. Anyway, these videos are slightly out of order for me. Anyway, Ralph's doing a good job. They'll be slightly out of order from what I had originally said because of my distraction coming back and having to build this crazy module. Now I've moved on with a lot more of the lower level structural components. Next month we will be much more deep dive on the actual bridge stuff as we talk more in depth about those girders, and you see the thing start looking more like a bridge with girders next month, and then towers, which I'm really excited about that one. So thanks everybody for joining us this month. Sorry that I was behind on this month, but
lots more to look forward to.
And I apologize completely, but, and I know I've lost the argument as soon as I say this, because that's what happens. In my defense, I spent about 70 or 80 hours building this module for me, but also for you guys. And that's where my time was. That's where the time went. But Ralph has convinced me that it will be worth it. We'll see. We'll hold him accountable if it's not.
Hey, I got broad shoulders. It's okay.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good night, everybody.
See ya.